Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's well. Welcome to the webinar. I just see the numbers going up. I'm like, okay. If you won't mind, if you can, introduce yourself through the chat. Just your name and whereabouts you are as well. That'd be fantastic. Be great. And we're just going to give it a minute to give people some time to join the webinar. Hope you're all enjoying your day as well. It's been raining in Coventry where I am, so it started off being sunny, and now it's raining. Who we got? Hi Asha from UAE. Okay, how are things there? Hania, Felt from London. How you doing, Hania? Good to meet you guys. Hope the weather is pleasant where you are as well. As I said, it's been raining here. Hello, Patricia. So yeah, we'll just give it about 30 more seconds and we can kick start. Hi, Marie. Michelle as well. How you doing? Belfast. Great. Awesome. Awesome. I think I might make a start as well. Prashant, how you doing from Hillfields? How's it going? We've actually got a Hillfields in Coventry as well. I'm not sure if you're from Hillfields in Cov or Hillfields a different place. Okay. So good afternoon. Hope everyone is well. Oh, from Cov. Go on. Hope everyone is well. Enjoying the day. Welcome to the webinar. It's an absolute pleasure on my part to be able to be here with you all and to hopefully share some insight. And I wanted to use the chat as much as you can, as much as you want as well. And if you have any questions from anything that I've gone through, we'll have a Q&A at the end, probably about 10, 15 minutes, to sort of highlight the questions that you have. All right. Okay, cool. So I'll make a start then. So yeah, first, thank you for joining. Thank you to Collins as well and Cassie for making this happen. So my name is John Bernard, and I'm the Coventry Poet Laureate, and I'm also a youth mentor. I run a foundation called BASE, which is an acronym for Be a Change Everywhere. And with BASE, the vision has been to work with young people in different settings. So we work in prisons, youth prisons. We work in primary schools, secondary schools, youth organizations, youth clubs. And we try to utilize the power of the creative mediums, i.e. poetry, music, and creative writing to help young people explore their emotions, but also find their voices through the mediums. And it's been great. It's been a journey. And what we have seen is we've seen a remarkable sort of impact in young people really kind of grabbing a hold of poetry, especially in the spoken word element, and especially in Coventry and running with it, which has been great. And alongside that, I'm also a musician as well. So what I wanted to sort of focus on today in terms of topic is, how you all can empower your pupils to express themselves creatively through poetry. And I say this with humility because I'm pretty sure you all are doing a lot of great work, and I hope with this webinar, it will just be like a supplement and add on to the great work that you're all already doing. So with myself, I wanted to sort of start off with my journey and what sort of brought me into poetry and especially into writing as well. So I've been very, very blessed to work with incredible brands. by being able to tell their stories through poetry and the spoken word. And sometimes what happens is we look at all these things, and we look at the accolades and achievements, and we're so wowed by them, but we forget about the process in between and the starting points. And when I was thinking about what to do with this presentation and what I wanted to highlight, I started reflecting about my journey and how I started and how important school was for me, and especially my teachers who kind of paved the way for me to be inspired, but also to be motivated in the passion and desire that I had to write or in writing. And I remember being a young person who, struggled a lot with identity, struggled with identity, and also that time I was struggling with displacement and loss. And I remember going into school and my English teacher saying to me, I love the stories that you're writing. Have you ever sort of thought about poetry? Have you ever thought about writing poetry? And I said to her, not really. So what she said to me was, how about we start with journaling? So I started with journaling, and she said to me, you know what? I don't mind what you journal about, but you can journal about anything. It could be, you had a good day, write it down, journal about it. If you had a bad day, journal it and write it down. And these were the principles, in fact, that my mom sort of kind of instilled in me when I was young as well, but I kind of just put it aside. But I remember my teacher sort of like reigniting that passion of journaling. So I started journaling again. And the journaling turned and became, poems. And I said to Miss, I've got these poems that I've written that all stem from my journey. And she said, this is great. This is fantastic. Okay, cool. What can we do with these? Okay, we're going to perform them. And my teacher kind of went through this thing of like prepping me to start performing. And she brought in external mentors from different parts of the country to help me and my friends with writing and being able to perform. And she set up these summer showcases and these talent shows. And I remember us just performing what we had written, and just feeling so encouraged and feeling so energized. And I remember just kind of looking at my teacher and saying, just thank you, because you know what, without her realizing, she had provided me with a pathway, and this is why this topic is so important for me. What she did for me was she created a foundation, and whatever I was going to build on, that foundation was going to be built on with desire and passion and a sense of confidence in my voice. And this is why this topic, it's so important to me, and I feel like teachers have that power to inspire and to also create in their students that sense of confidence, that foundation of validation and being valued, and their voice is being valued. And the best way to sort of do it from my own personal experiences has been through the written and the spoken word of poetry. So what I wanted us to sort of look at today was to look at why poetry matters for young people, and how a young person, showed me the transformative power of poetry. I had a young mentee who I met who was, and I'm going to go through, his story, but who I met who was struggling, and introducing them to poetry sort of changed the trajectory of where they ended up, and what barriers stand in the way of creative expression. There are some barriers which are self-inflicted, and sometimes we put our defensive mechanism up because we hear the word poetry and we're thinking it's not for me, it's quite elitist. And there are some barriers which are, institutional, and like the curriculum, for example, at times, and also wanted to look at strategies to encourage creative expression and practical ways to introduce poetry in a classroom. But before I do all that, there are two questions I wanted to pose to you lovely people. The first question being, have you noticed certain students disengaging from creative writing, whether it's poetry, whether it's telling stories, and why do you think that is? And I'm going to give you a minute to sort of think about it. And if you have any answers or insights, if you could just pop them in the chat, that would be great. So I'm just going to give you a quick minute to kind of think about it, reflect, and then you can just pop the answers in the chat, please. Okay, not knowing what to write, like, yeah, 100%. Basic grammar, yes, 100%, 100%. Sometimes not seeing themselves as writers can be a barrier. That's a big one sometimes as well. I think when we think writer again, we go back to the preconceived notions that we have of what a writer looks like. And I've had it sometimes when I've gone to a school and the teachers have introduced me as, okay, we've got the Coventry Poet Laureate here in the school. Oh, and here's Jean Bernard. And the the students sometimes are quite shocked. They're like, "Oh, sir, you're young, you're right." And I'm like, "What were you expecting me to be old?" And like, yeah, when we think poetry, we think right, we think an old person, you know. And it's funny you said about it's those conceptions that we have sometimes, those preconceived notions. You feel like they're not good. Yes, that's a big one as well, right? And the fear of making mistakes. That's a huge one. And I was definitely one of those students as well who kind of feared that, my writing wasn't good enough. Did I need to use the, big words, to articulate my point? And it was my English teacher who just said to me, it's important for you to write from a place of truth and a place of heart, and everything else kind of takes shape along the way. If I find it, have nothing of importance to say. Yeah, I'm really care for expressing their innermost feelings. Oh, that's a big one, Prashant. 100%. I do agree with that. And majority of the young people that I've worked with normally have this thought in mind where do does it matter what I have to say? I'm from this area, or I talk a certain way. Am I going to be heard without realizing how powerful the voices actually are? Being unable to organize their ideas or knowing where to start. That's a huge one. Thank you so much, guys. The next question I wanted to pose was, if you could change one thing about how poetry is taught, what would it be? Just one thing about how poetry is taught. I know there are many things that's even coming through my mind right now, but what is one thing that you would change? I'm gonna give you again a minute. If you have any answers, just put them through the chat. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Marie, I agree with you completely. Some students definitely do not want to reveal their feelings. 100%. That sense of vulnerability, especially when it comes to writing poetry, I think majority of the times we do associate, poetry with vulnerability, and rightly so. And I guess sometimes we kind of forget about the playing aspect of it as well. So I agree. Yes. Harriet, I'm with you totally. Accessibility is a big one. 100% is a big one. And I've had it before where a young person's come up to me and I've told them, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm going to recite some poems for you. Let me know what you think. And after reciting these poems, they're like, oh, so you sure that's poetry? I'm like, yeah. But then they're like, but I can understand it. And I'm like, you're meant to understand it, It's not meant to be this Rubik's Cube or, too abstract that you kind of, struggle to understand it. So it's true, yeah, make it relate to their life 100%. Levon, 100% agree with you. He has to relate to the life experiences and have to see themselves through the poems. So starting with literary devices and analysis, let's do this experience. Asha, I agree with you completely. And that's what I'm a big believer, which I'll talk about, as we're going on through this presentation, this webinar. I'm a big believer of sometimes, being non-restrictive and removing sometimes form, and allowing children to sort of play and enjoy the motion of just writing their thoughts down. Normal library poems more regularly in the class. Yes, yes, I do agree 100%. Given the opportunity to recite stuff and to also recite stuff that means something to them. Kathy, be moving throughout the year rather than as a yes, 100%, 100%. I agree with you totally. This is a huge one because National Poetry Day comes in, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, we need to get a poet in. We need to do this, and children need to write this and learn about this, and everything's crammed in a week to kind of accommodate Poetry Day or whatever it may be." And I think if it was again, like you said, moving in throughout the year, I think it'd be a very, very, very powerful thing. Thank you so much for sharing. So why poetry matters. I think poetry is a great, great tool for self-expression, building confidence and emotional well-being. But I also think that, poetry is like a megaphone in a sense that by saying that, I mean, it amplifies your voice. And once you discover its power, it almost mobilizes you to to connect with your true self. And once this connection happens, I think for me, what happens is it's almost oneness with yourself and the truth that you want to highlight and articulate. And you find a sense of strength because you realize that, you know what, I've got this medium, and this medium requires me to tell the truth and to tell it how it is. And there's a poet called Amiri Baraka, and she said something that was really cool and that always stays with me. And what she said was, a poem can be a gun, you know, or a poem can be a place, and poetry has that power to be both things, depending on what you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it. And it also exposes young people to a wide range of language, vocabulary, and grammar. And what I've realized with my own personal experience, but also the young people that I've worked with, is the power behind poetry and young people figuring out how to express themselves and explore their emotions is so powerful, because you get young people who are disengaged because they feel like they haven't got the right language or the right words to articulate how they're feeling, right? And I feel like poetry provides them with the creative way, but also a flexible way to explore their emotions. And it also allows them to improve their communication skills, because I remember being young, and I remember my English teacher saying to me, okay, you're struggling with your vocabulary. Okay, what can you do? Read a dictionary. Okay, go through the dictionary, find different words, find synonyms of words that you want to use or you're used to using. And I just began loving words and love finding different words to the common words I was already using. And just this thing alone kind of helped me to kind of figure out, okay, cool, how can I write this poem, but then I'm going to play with this word and use this metaphor. So it almost became like a fun game. And poetry has that element of it as well. And it allows the young person to be exposed to different language structures as well, which is quite cool. And a huge one for me has been, it's a comfort during hard times. I feel like we can't sort of negate or take away from how poetry can really help us to find our place in points in life where things are difficult, and especially when you are young and you are trying to find something that resonates with a feeling that you have, and a poem can really do that. There's a really cool concept from an initiative called Poetry Pharmacy, where you go into this space, and it's in London. You go into this space, and it's literally like a pharmacy, right? And they've got different sort of remedies for whatever it is that you want. So say, for example, you want to detox from social media, they'll give you this little bottle that says detoxing from social media. And within that bottle, there's small capsules. And within these capsules are quotes from poets and lines from particular poems that will help you and to help you reflect and meditate. And I think that's a really cool way of making poetry comforting, and a really cool way of making poetry accessible to young people. If we can kind of make it possible for them to have things like that in schools as well, that'd be quite cool. And another part is, so because of the work that I do, I get to mentor a lot of young people, and I come across so many different young people with so many different cases and different age groups as well. And we're going to call him Jay. I was introduced to a young boy called Jay through a youth club and a school initiative. So there's a youth club that goes into a lot of schools, doing different sort of workshops. And there was a young boy who was really struggling, and his teacher was figuring out ways and trying to figure out ways of, how to help them, and how to help them adapt to school life, and how to help them to express themselves. And I remember the youth club reached out to me and said, you know what, we've got this boy, amazing, very creative, but it's really struggling. And the projection was, if he carries on doing some of the things that he was doing, he was going to be expelled from school. So I remember meeting Jay and having a conversation with Jay, and Jay was really bright, and but I could sense a sense of restriction, that he didn't want to go too deep in terms of how he was feeling. There was a lid, on his emotions. And I said to him, do you journal? Do you write? And he was like, not really. I said, okay, cool. So I introduced him to journaling as a way to express his emotions. And, again, it was replicating what my teacher sort of kind of gave to me. And I remember saying to Jay, okay, cool, you've written this stuff, okay, let's start writing some poems, and I gave him some prompts to go alongside the poems as well. And he started writing these poems, and before you know it, he was almost kind of reaching to parts of him that he struggled to express before, but now through poetry, he was able to communicate parts and teach us. As he was doing this, he started sharing. He started sharing his poems with his class, and the teacher started bringing him to do assemblies for his school, and he just built a whole lot of confidence. And by doing so, he ended up doing some poetry slams which he won, and he ended up performing in like talent shows across the city. And there was a huge transformation in who he was and what he was dealing with too, when he discovered a way of communicating and articulating his emotion through poetry. And from when he started sharing his poems to right now, where he's doing really, really well and getting amazing, amazing grades, I saw the impact how poetry really helped shape Jay and helped him find his voice and connect with others in ways that he wasn't able to before. And it's so funny now when he goes to school, where before he felt like, I don't belong here. I haven't found my community. Like I'm just a loner in school, where now he's very popular and everyone calls him poet, and he owns the title. Like, yeah, I'm a poet. And for me, that was a beautiful um almost representation of how powerful poetry can be, for a young person. Now, Jay is just one person, right? But there are barriers to creative expression that most of us kind of face and go through. And some of you have already kind of highlighted some as well. But it'll be good to sort of see what some of the barriers do you all sort of have from your students in terms of creative expression through poetry. There are some remarks I'm going to go through that I've heard myself personally. But if you won't mind popping into the chat, some of the stuff that you guys have heard, students say, even some of the barriers that you might have yourself in terms of when it comes to tackling poetry and teaching poetry. And I'm just going to look at the chat as well to see what people are saying. So some of the barriers. Yeah, Michelle. Yep. Children embarrassed to get up and perform. That's a big one. Yeah, that is a big one, and yeah, to do with confidence as well. Difficult with concentrating and listening because so many distractions. Yeah, that's a huge one as well. Where teachers and students feel intimidated about poetry, fearing they won't understand it or interpret it correctly. Yep, I'm with you on that, Asha. Yep, 100%. And I've spoken to a few teachers who have actually highlighted the same thing, saying that, because of the way they were taught poetry in school, that they have this sense of resentment and the sense of fear when it comes to tackling poetry, because they're like, oh, I didn't really enjoy it when I was in school. So when I teach it, am I gonna kind of showcase that thing of me not enjoying it? Or am I going to do it justice as well? So I really, really understand that part. They don't want to perform and interpreting it, how they feel it. And as to rhyme, yes, the final, yes. And that's a common misconception as well about the rhyming part of it as well. And majority of the time, when you tell them you don't have to rhyme, they're like, yes, you do, sir. I'm like, no, you really, really do not. And you show them examples of different poems that do not rhyme but are really powerful poems. They're like, oh, okay. I can do this, better poetry is boring. An old fashioned, yeah, that's a big one. I hear that all the time. Yeah, perfect, perfect, perfect. So, thank you so much for sharing those barriers. And it's really true. I've heard that, from my personal experiences, poetry is boring. I'm not a poet, sir. I don't know where to start. And a common one that I normally hear is, so I'm not Shakespeare. And I always respond to them like, yeah, 100%, I get it. You're not Shakespeare, which is good. You're you. Shakespeare is Shakespeare. You are you. No one has the same voice as you in this world. And also the powerful part, no one has the same experiences as you and the same insights that you will have, when you're writing a piece of poetry. And I guess, where they're coming from is a sense of relatability. How relatable is the stuff that they're reading? I think we highlighted it before when we first started that sometimes it's not really relatable, it's not really accessible, and young people feel that if they don't see themselves within a poem, if they don't see the language that they normally use within a piece of work, sometimes it's difficult for them to pay attention or to appreciate it for what it is, and utilizing the power of the old poets, and also bringing in the contemporary poets as well that can kind of balance the love for poetry in young people, in them seeing themselves through those poets. And there's been a time where, which is quite funny. A young person I've worked with also who hated poetry, who didn't want anything to do with it because they've had such a bad experience with it through school. And I gave them Caleb Femi's collection called Poor, and the red port, and they finished it within a couple of days. And I said to them, I thought you hated poetry. What's happened? How did you finish this book? And they said to me, oh my gosh, sir, I saw myself within the poems, and I saw, my environment within the poems. It's like, okay. And I said, that's exactly what poetry is. It's meant to hit you where you are and meet you where you are, but also you're meant to see yourself in those poems as well, which is quite cool. And I feel like another part that can be a barrier, but it can also be a good thing, is like the school environment in itself. It can both help, but at the same time it can also hinder creative expression. In the sense of helping is, school can really, and amazing teachers can really cultivate and help young people find their thing, through the art sometimes, and help them to be valued and validated, just like my teacher did for me. But at the same time, what can also happen is, because of the school curriculum, sometimes the school curriculum can be very rigid, and teachers can find it difficult to sort of step out the box. Sometimes it could be discouraging feedback to young people who, are dabbling into something and they're trying to be, experimental, and they're shut down straight away, by teachers who they're inspired by, and also sometimes a lack of artistic opportunities. And I think we're in a really beautiful time where, there are so many poets, diverse poets and poems, from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, that teachers can sort of draw from and draw resource from, and I don't feel like it's ever a bad thing to bring, external people in to kind of help out and provide young people with a different way of tackling and looking at poetry as well. And I think for me, ultimately, young people, they want to be heard, they want to feel heard in a safe space, and they want to feel validated. So I think teachers being able to create this safe and open and encouraging space is so important. And I think this kind of removes that barrier of, performance in essence, because you want to feel like, okay, I've been heard by my teacher. My teachers love what I'm writing, or they're pushing me to write some more. So, okay, cool. I don't know how to perform this, but Miss, or sir, can I go through this? Can you help me figure out how to perform? Okay, we're going to look at spoken word elements and spoken word poetry, and look at videos and how you can approach it. And I think these are really cool ways to sort of remove these barriers. And some of the strategies that have worked for me, when it's come to working with young people and encourage them to creatively express themselves through poetry, has been removing you know the barriers of form, first of all, because I feel like when you enter a space, and I always enter a space with no preconceived notions, in a sense of, yes, some young people might be really into poetry, they might be really far in terms of understanding form and rhythm and meter, and others might not be there yet, and I take that on board. So what I'd like to do is, I always like to give them the freedom to explore. And I take the non-restrictive approach, which is like the journaling approach, where we'll start off with the fundamentals, the basics. And I remember a friend of mine who's a football coach saying to me that sometimes we look at players, like he looks at players as a coach, and he says people are always wild about, people can do step overs and skills, right? But then he was like, the basics are what matters, the fundamentals, which is, in football sense, passing the ball, moving the ball, right? And for me, like poetry, the basics are writing, being able to write and write your thoughts down. So I take the journaling approach, where I get the young people to write stuff, and sometimes I give them prompts to kind of aid them into the writing, and these prompts will be, things that they're used to kind of listening to or hearing. It might be a lyric from their favorite songs. It might be a title from their favorite book. It might be maybe like a title from a movie or a series that they used to watching. And I get them to write their thoughts down about, and give their opinions on that particular prompt. And then we'll look at it, and then I say to them, okay, cool. Here are some forms you can look at. Can you move your journaling or your writing into this particular form? And I give them examples of different forms, and it works really well because they've already put pen to paper. They've already put pen to paper, and that fear of I don't know where to start. We've already started. Now it's just about moving them and creating a scaffolding for them to start building on. And another thing that's really, really helped is, especially on the performance side of things, is games that encourage storytelling. I think this is a huge one. A mentor of mine who's an incredible poet said to me, never stop playing. Never stop playing with words. Once you stop playing with words and you just formalize it to the point where, it's rigid and it's regimented, you lose that sense of the sense of play, but a sense of energy behind that thing. So there's a game that I love to play, and there's a game that I encourage teachers as well to play with their young people when it comes to the performance aspect of it. It's called Hide the Word. And how this game works is a volunteer will come up and you provide them with a word, it's one word, and then with that word, they're meant to tell a story, basically a 30-second story, and they're meant to hide that word into their story, right? They can't make it blatant, right? They have to hide that word into their story. And you give them maybe like 10 seconds to think about their stories. Doesn't have to make sense, doesn't have to be a true story. But what we're doing there, we want them to think about something and to just talk about it, right? And then hide their word. And then after they've finished their story, the rest of like everyone else would have 3 attempts to guess what the word was. But what this does is, first of all, it kills the nerves because they've already stood up and they've already shared, right? Helps them with the speaking part of it, the spoken word element. But also, thirdly, it's that they're thinking on their feet. They're freestyling, they're free versing, they're telling the story from the top of their head. And it's a really cool thing. And what always happens, it becomes like a domino effect where somebody will see their friend go up, and they'll be like, okay, do you know what? Oh, they've done it. I can do it as well. So then more and more people do it. And then by the time where, you go into the actual activity itself, whether it's writing and it's feedback time, they're able to feedback because they've already stood up, they've already killed the nerves, they're already, shared. So there isn't a worry to explore or share. And another part is, meeting them where they are. And I feel like meeting them with themes and relatable topics is really, really important. It's so difficult sometimes, not just a young person, but just as an adult, to be part of a conversation, something that you're not really accustomed of, or and you're not really aware of, and you're just trying to figure out ways to kind of step in and you know offer some type of insight, but it's difficult. But then it's like when you're given something that you're aware of and you know and you love or you're passionate about, it's easier for you to talk about it, and it's easier for you to sort of like go for it and have this conversation and share. So relatable topics and themes are really, really powerful things. And practical ways to bringing poetry into the classroom that I've seen and I've really admired, and I also feel like they work really, really well. It's a school that I went to, and I was speaking to an English teacher, and I asked them, okay, because in that school, poetry is a huge thing, and they have so many poets in that school, and one of their pupils became one of the young poet laureates. So I asked them, was like, how have you cultivated that sense of perception on poetry where young people feel like, yeah, I can do this, And she said to me that, she creates this thing called like a daily poetry prompt factor, where what she would do is she started off doing it on a weekly basis where Friday comes, she'll have like a prompt ready and then she'll put it by the door, right? So when the students leave, this is a prompt that they need to work on over the weekend, right? And they can write a poem, that kind of relates to that prompt. And what she does with them is she's like, once you've written that, doesn't have to be, it could be as long as you want it to be or short as you want it to be, but I want you to place it on my desk. And you can put your name on it if you want. Don't have to. It's completely up to yourself. And when he first started, it was only a couple of people that were, what they were doing it and taking part, a couple of students. But then as time progressed, more and more students start taking part. And what she started doing was she'll grab some and then she'll put them on a poetry wall, and these would be like the poems of the week, And for the young people, again, it's that validation, right? And that value of my teachers read this and they love it and they've put it on a wall, you know. And now it's a daily thing where she would just literally put a daily prompt, and they'll go back, they'll write some stuff, they'll put it on her desk, she'll read them, and shoot at time she might read some of them, or she might read, all of them, depending on how many that she has. And I think that's a really cool thing. And another cool thing is a poetry wall in the classroom. And a poetry wall can be like what a teacher's done, where you put in poems that the young people have created, but or also it could be, each week, you're introducing the young people to a poet, maybe a poet from a different country, a poet from who you might write in a different language, So each week they're being introduced to maybe a new form of poetry and a new poet as well. I think that's a really cool thing for young people to get used to that mindset of, poetry is for everyone, but also there is a power in, everyone's experience, And another huge thing is hosting poetry slams and maybe talent shows within the school, because again it gives young people the opportunity to step on stage and share their work, because I feel like, in the beginning, young people might be daunted to perform in the classroom or whatever it may be, but as time progresses and they grow and they get to that point where they are willing to perform and they're willing to share their work, and it's like, what's the next step, and it's providing them with that next step of, okay, we're going to create a poetry slam, or we're going to create a talent show, and we're going to have poets open up, or poets end the show, or we've got an assembly on, I don't know, Easter. Can you write a poem on Easter? And it's just these really cool things that work. And also there are great places for young people to have their work submitted to. Cassie's going to put some links as well in the chat. There's a competition called Poetry by Heart for schools, where young people can send through their work, and they'll get a chance to perform if they get selected. And there's places like Sparks Young Writers, where young people can be parts of anthologies, and it's a really cool thing of, like, young people seeing their work being published and part of, like, esteemed and published places, so which is quite cool for them. And lastly, I just wanted to sort of emphasize on the point of, we can change the narrative. Poetry is for everyone. I think that's a really important thing to always remember, and to always sort of reiterate to the young people that you work with. Poetry is for everyone, and it's readily there for them to use. And it's what Nina Simone said. We always have to reflect the times, right? And for young people to understand the opportunity of being able to reflect the times through an art form like poetry is such a beautiful thing. And poetry exists in a way we express emotions, celebrate moments, and find meaning in words. It's literally everywhere. Sometimes we speak poetically, and as much as we try to run away from it, it's literally like that friend that's always there, just waiting for us to acknowledge them. And the future only holds, what we give it, and your young people are the future. And the question that I would love you to reflect on is, what are you giving them when it comes to teaching them how to express themselves? And obviously, notably in this particular webinar, it's through poetry. I think it's a really cool thing for them to sort of think about, and to start for you guys to start thinking about, and to kind of pass that baton on to them. And I wanted to sort of leave you with a quick story that I love, and it's taught me a lot about what significance actually means, right? And it's a beautiful story by Wangari Maathai, who was the first African woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And she spoke about the hummingbird, and it was simply a time where the forest was burning, and there were animals coming out and watching this forest burn, and they were all shocked and overwhelmed. And I was as they were looking at different animals, there were elephants, lions, you name it, they were there, and they were looking, just staring, shocked. And this hummingbird, this tiny little hummingbird, looked and saw that there was a problem. And instead of kind of dwelling on the problem, they thought, okay, what's the solution? So this hummingbird flew to a nearby stream and went back and forth, just grabbing drops of water and then trying to drop them into the fire. Now, as the hummingbird was doing this, the other animals started to ridicule the hummingbird, saying things like, discouraging things like, who do you think you are? That's not making any difference at all. what's the point of doing that? And rightly so, in a sense of the elephant probably could have, used his trunk and got a lot more water from the stream to help with quenching the fire. But then the hummingbird responded with something that was really beautiful and really powerful. And the hummingbird said, I'll do the best that I can, right? And he taught me an important thing, that significance isn't necessarily about the size of something or the knowledge of something, but sometimes it's just about having the courage to do something and to offer something, when there's a solution that's needed. So I just want to say a huge thank you for turning up to this webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've written and taken some things that, that will help. And like I said before, I'm pretty sure you all are doing amazing work. And I hope this is just like a supplement and an add-on to the great work that you're already doing. And I'm happy to take any questions. If you have any questions that you feel like you want to kind of throw away, please go ahead and do it.
Thank you so much, John. That was amazing.
Thank
We've had quite a few questions actually, so I'm going to just jump straight into it. Our first question was in the Q&A, and it says, do you have any advice for supporting students who find writing about their feelings or personal experiences triggering?
Yeah, most definitely. I think one thing that's really helped me, what my teacher told me was, when you're exploring poetry and you're exploring writing, it's not necessarily about writing about the things that trigger you or the trauma that you have, but sometimes going back to the things that you love. What do you want to talk about that you love? What do you want to see in terms of your future? What do you want to see in terms of where you want to be in a couple of years' time? Or what do you enjoy doing currently? And I think starting from there allows a person, a young person especially, to kind of just draw from the happy well within them, right? And to explore writing through a happy medium. And then within that time element, I think what happens is you naturally go to a point where, okay, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. What do I really want to say now? And I think it's a natural occurrence rather than, and I feel like this is so important to not push somebody to talk about something that's triggering or something that can open a lot of doors, but allowing them to open those doors when they're ready. But I think our duty is, as teachers and facilitators, is to, how can I get them to journal and write? How can I get them to write about things that they love that would probably lead on to things that they need to talk about, So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And on the flip side then, in terms of teachers and resistance, what should teachers do? Do you have any tips for when they want to teach modern poetry, contemporary poetry, but maybe they're coming up against resistance from colleagues or parents? Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I think it's important for them to sort of figure out what that resistance is and why there is a resistance first and foremost. I think if it's to aid the development of young people and getting them to a place where they need to get to, then I don't think there should be a reasonable resistance to kind of counteract that. And I think sometimes it's about, again, being radical and being that hummingbird where, that sense of courage you have a duty for those kids. How can I get my young people to a place where they love this thing because, it's such an important thing to love, because it will help them, long term. And I feel like introducing maybe those who are resistant into contemporary poetry that they might like as well, and they might start enjoying, and having those truthful and honest conversation of, you know, is this relatable for my students? In terms of demographic, in terms of where I am, in terms of where I'm teaching, is this really relatable to my students, or am I just kind of banging on a drum and it's just noisy? So I think things like that can be quite helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely
Right.
worth looking into local poets, isn't it? Because then obviously they might be willing to also to come into the school too. So that will really help to bring up that interactivity.
Definitely, and most local poets are willing to go to schools and help
Yeah.
out because, and I think, and it's so funny because you speak to poets, and one of the things that kind of is like a recurring thing is we hated poetry when we were kids, because of how it was taught. So one of the things that every poet, well, majority of poets that I've met have come across is, I want to make it fun, I want to make it as accessible and relatable to young people, So it's definitely worthwhile bringing local poets into schools and kind of sharing ideas on how you can find a balance between the two, between the fun, but also the form side of things, the structure side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny that most poets actually didn't like poetry at school. Um, Great. And then we've also got a question about performance. So, any tips for helping students who struggle performing or who've had maybe like previous bad experience with performing, maybe they felt embarrassed. Any tips there?
Yeah, definitely. I think playing through it is a great way of doing it. So hide the word, the game I explained earlier on is a great way of doing it. But there's another way that I tend to kind of get people out of their comfort zone is we get into a circle. I have a small ball, and what we'll do is I'll get them to shout an emotion, right? So it might be, I don't know, sad, and I'll get somebody else to shout a phrase, and it might be like, I like pizza, right? And I'll need to say that phrase with that emotion. So like, sad, like pizza, you know, and I'll do it. Or somebody might say, "Oh, sir, can you do it in a I don't know excitable way?" And I'm like, "I like pizza," and I'll shout, and then I'll pass the ball to somebody else, and somebody else will come in the middle, and they'll be like, "What's your phrase?" We'll make it as fun as possible. But what we do in there is again, it's about killing the nerves, but also creating a safe space. And I think the safe space element is such a powerful element because young people most of the time when they walk into a space, it's like I'm too cool for school. I don't embarrass myself. But when they see you embarrass yourself or you being excitable and, maybe shouting and reciting poetry in a certain way, they're like, oh, sir's doing this. So that's quite funny. I'm going to do it as well. And when one person does it, it's a domino effect. More than want to do it. So I think that might help. But again, it's gauging the situation. Some restrictions are obviously deeper than others, and some young people might deal with social anxiety. So it's just gauging the situation and kind of walking them through and helping them through that sort of journey. And there's one young person I worked with who was a great writer, wrote amazing stuff, but found it really difficult performing. And what I used to do with them was, I'll stand up with them, and I'll be like, okay, cool. I'll read a line, you read a line, right? And I'll mess up the line just on purpose and they'll look at me like, you're messing up my poem. And then and then I'll be like, no, let me just read it properly, So it's those little cool things, but gauging the situation as well.
Yeah, so definitely have fun with it then.
Sorry?
Definitely have fun with it then.
Yeah, have 100%, have fun with
Yeah,
it. Yeah, enjoy it. It's meant to be enjoyed. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. The questions just keep coming in, I have to say. We have another one kind of on the flip side of that too. So, how do you work with young people who are confident speakers? So on the other side of the coin, confident speakers, but maybe less confident in their writing.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think it's what do you want from them? I think again, exploring the freedom of free verse writing kind of gives you the gist of where a young person is in terms of the writing ability. But then I think what happens then is it's kind of like in drips and drabs, offering them form, offering them way, whether it's metaphor, bringing the metaphors in, different language devices. But I think it should be done in a way that kind of matches their pace to a certain extent. I guess it's different from me because as a facilitator, I'm there 2 hours and I try to make it as fun as possible and I try to kind of include these things and work with them. But I think with teachers, it might be a bit different because it's you got that time with them, so you definitely have the blessing of time. So I think it's working to their pace, but also kind of figuring out, okay, cool, they need improvement in this area. What can I do to make that this area fun for them to sort of draw an inspiration from? So, like for example, a lot of young people, when you tell them to, okay, here's a prompt, but can you add like 3 to 4 metaphors? And some of them might be like, oh, so I can't think of metaphors. Oh my gosh. And you give them example metaphors, they're like, oh, those are metaphors. You're like, yeah, I use them all the time. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So I think it's just breaking down things into chunks, digestible chunks that they can understand,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. The same person in the same question also
Yeah.
asked, do you have any strategies for oral composition?
For oral competition,
Oral composition, sorry.
oral composition,
Yeah,
in what sense? As in like the spoken word element, or
I think so, probably. I mean, the person who answered this, they might ask this, might want to add some stuff in the chat.
yeah.
But I assume it's to do with sort of exposition, narration, that sort of thing. We can come back to it and the person can put something in the chat if that's better for you. Yeah. Okay. Great. We have, and I'll add this one. I'll keep this one open, and if the person who asked it wants to elaborate, then they can, and if not, we can leave it to the side. But we have another one of could you recommend any games or activities for primary school pupils who that would help them to take their first steps writing poems?
Yes, definitely. One of the games that I love to play is pass the notebook or pass the pad. And you can start with just a sentence, and then what they'll do is they'll just pass that pad along, and then they'll add on to what you've written, and if there's 30 kids, just pass it on. That'll be 30 lines, and then the last person will read the poem, and sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, but again, it's just a fun way to get them to write. Another one is a game called Stop the Bus. So you might have played it before with your students, where you have categories, and say for example, you've got, I don't know, movies, music, and let's say food. And what they'll do is, so you go through the alphabet in your head as the teacher, and they'll say stop the bus. Whatever letter that you land on, let's just say it's A, they would have to go through that list and then write things that begin with A. So, for example, movies, I don't know, it might be a movie called Acrobatics or whatever. If it's food, it might be an apple, whatever it may be. But then what they'll do is with these words, you might be like circle, you might play it 4 times or whatever it is. Circle the words and then get them to write poems about these words, or write 3 stanzas on different themes that surround those words that you've chosen for them. That's another cool way. And I think hide the word is another really cool way to start getting them to speak out loud, but also to think about telling stories. So yeah, I hope that's helped. Yeah. There's quite
Yeah.
a few things I can send across to Cassie that she can send
Yeah.
through to
We
everyone
can
else.
definitely send
Yeah.
those over when we send over the recording as well. So, great. We have two final questions, unless any more come in, of course. Actually about poems that you've shared. So, do you have a favorite poem of yours that you like performing and discussing with students?
Is it a poem that I've written myself, or a
Maybe
poem from?
both. Maybe one that you've written yourself, and maybe one that someone else has written.
Yes. So a poem that I've written myself that I always love to share is a poem called "Aim for the Moon." And it just talks about the journey of, you come from a space of low expectations, but then that sense of tenacity and resilience and push gets you to a different point. And it's more like an inspirational journey, a narrative poem. And a poem that I really love, from one of my favorite poets, is a poem called "A Portable Paradise" by Roger Robinson. And I think it's a beautiful poem that, it always reminds me of home, but it also reminds me of my mom, and through that poem, it talks about, the things that are paradise for him, the portable things that he holds, and sometimes it could be a picture or a memory or whatever it may be. So I think that's a really cool poem. Or yeah, I think those two, I would say. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. And then the last question we've got here is there a particular poem or poet that you've shared with students that's really surprised them? Maybe the use of form or language hasn't conformed to their idea of a stereotypical poem.
Yeah, definitely. There's an amazing poet who actually was the Birmingham Poet Laureate, called Jasmine Gardosi, and she did this poem called "Be Poet," where she beatboxes, but then there's also words within the beatbox, and I thought it was such an incredible way of delivering a poem. And when young people look at it, they're like, "Oh my God, she's beatboxing. I'm used to that. I know what that is. Oh, it's a poem as well, and she's telling you how to be a poet, through that beatboxing. Oh gosh, this is different." I think that poem really, yeah, it's a powerful, powerful, powerful representation of what poetry can be, and the levels of how you can use form to your advantage as well. Another poem I'll probably say is, oh, I'll probably say Casey Bailey's "Dear Brom." I think that's another poem where it's very lyrical, and the rhyme scheme is something that a lot of young people will be accustomed to if they listen to rap and just spoken word in general. So I think those two poems. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We haven't had any other questions come in so far. We've got about 6 minutes left, but I think that's quite a nice place. Oh, sorry. Harriet did she did come back about the oral composition in the chat. So that last question was me. I was thinking about creating poems just by speaking out loud rather than writing it down first.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful way of doing it. And I think young people will appreciate that more, because I think sometimes when you ask them to have an opinion on something, and talk about it, I think they're more ready to sort of talk about stuff and say stuff. And I think that's a really cool way of maybe you can scribe what they're saying or record it and then kind of amend it as time progresses. But I think that's a really cool way of doing it. And it's a freestyle element again. I think that always works. Anytime you remove pressure from anything, I think people are comfortable to sort of fly like the hummingbird. I'm going to say hummingbird quite a bit, just that, to remind people that story. But yeah, anytime pressure is removed, I think people are able to maneuver differently. So I think, yeah, that freestyle element, I think that's a really cool way of doing it. So maybe getting them to talk about a particular theme and then you either scribe or record it and then, you know, getting them to memorize it. Not too sure, but yeah, I think that's a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah, amazing. Cool, thank you. Oh, wait, no, we have another question. Sorry, we could be here a long time. We've got a question in the chat. How do you find it best to encourage and develop students' observation and listening skills?
Observation and listening skills.
Hmm.
That's a really, really tough one. But I think observation wise, again, it's saying things in a way that can grab their attention and ear. You know, I think sometimes we lose our young people when we speak in a language or speak in a way that they might not be used to, you know. And I think even if we are going to do that and introduce them and expose them to different things, it's firstly finding like an entry point, you know. And I was doing a workshop with an amazing poet called Emily Jones, and she did this poem where she took all these like words that young people use, like lit and everything else, and she put them to a poem, right? And when she delivered it, all the young people went crazy. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I know what that means. How do you know what that means?" You know, all this stuff. And she found an entry point, right? And the workshop that she was doing was analyzing poetry afterwards, right? And for the young people, they were already hooked just because Emily met them where they needed to be met. And I think listening skills are kind of go hand in hand with. I think once you meet them where they're meant to be met, and also giving them the validation that they need to be heard, it's like it's like a call and response thing where, you know, I'm hearing you and then, oh, okay, you can hear me out as well, you know, and a non-judgmental space is always a helpful space, if that helps. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Do you have any final words or anything? We've got 3 minutes left, but I'm happy to end it there.
Yeah, I'll just say a huge thank you for everyone that's attended the webinar. Thank you to Cassie and Collins. And make sure you check out my Favorite Day. I'm part of an anthology of a Collins book called My Favorite Day. For any of your students who are gold standard, please pick it up. But also keep in touch as well. I'd love to hear more and I'd love to sort of help out anywhere I can. So just a huge thank you. I'm wishing you a lovely evening or day.